Eric Rise, the lean startup and all of that, get it out to the market quickly and listen to the market. Since then, there's been a lot of studies as well. And it's not just absolutely so clear, whatever the market tells you, do. Because if you look at the major disruptors and innovators out there, they had very negative reactions from the market. The market would have told them stop, because most people don't like change. So the idea of saying, okay, I'm going to listen to people, and we know people don't like change, and you're trying to change something, so you have to have that within a context. You're listening to people's opinion and input within a certain context. That's not to say at some point, if you feel you have the solution that you're bringing to bear, and the market's saying we either don't want that solution, or the way you're solving it isn't helping me. Again, that's a how. I mean, the second is not a how. The second, the first is a why, but the second is a how, and that you can change on, and that you can adapt, and that's sustainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, as I'm digesting everything you guys are telling me and sharing, which I really appreciate. I mean, when I really think about it and look at what we're doing, I still see the why is intact, right? And I had an old boss, Katya Fuchs, who gave some really good advice years ago. Like, as a product person, as an entrepreneur, you have to be wedded to a customer problem. The solution, it is what it is. But for myself and for our team, we are wedded to the customer problem that fitness is still too complicated. It's still too hard to navigate. And we're trying to put our ego aside and say, all right, well, what does it really look like to make it simpler? What is that delivery mechanism? What does that product look like? And that's really what we're exploring right now.
And I think that is a great North Star. And like you said, if you're switching from if you're switching from B2C to B2B, especially now, the first thing that we would advise practically is to sit with your team and articulate the why. And now it's not just your why that you started. It's, you've got a group that are trying to move forward. So when you're talking about the first step of reprioritizing or strategizing or creating your new roadmap, it's, are we all still aligned on the why? And can we write it on paper? Can we articulate it out loud? And can we make sure we're all standing on it as a common ground? And that, it can be, especially when you're in the day-to-day, it can be implied, but especially when the container or the how is changing, making sure you create some time with your team to actually articulate it and make sure everyone's with you is going to be super critical. Because then after that, being able to iterate quickly, even if you're going in what seems like a radical new direction, will not seem as bad. Because even some of the anecdotes you said about now we're becoming let's say a structured data or more of a technology focused company, or we're selling to businesses, if the outcome of your sales process is still making fitness simpler for users in certain markets, and you have a clear line of sight into how your activity is contributing to what makes you excited, then you can be confident that it's still going to be a sustainable business endeavor for you and your team at this juncture, at this part of your life cycle.
Definitely.
And I don't want and Sam mentioned alignment. I just want to echo to make sure it's emphasized, because the answers may not be as clear as you might expect. So it's a good exercise.
Definitely. Yeah, this is actually something I had to do a lot as a PM at these different companies. And there's this one framework we used at eBay that Mark Benioff at Salesforce created called V2 Mom that does exactly what you're describing. And it's actually great you guys mentioned this, because we had done this last year when we were still pushing the consumer focus, and we need to go do it again as we're looking at this B2B focus. But yeah, it's a really simple framework to just get everyone to sit down and be like, well, what do we care about? Like, what matters to us as we're trying to achieve a vision? How are we going to get there? What's in the way? And how do we know when we've hit success? So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and any method, a lot of methods work as long as the underlying is what makes you guys still excited to be part of this team. What makes you want to make this company work? Because if you lose that, then you're sunk. But as long as that has integrity, it doesn't matter if you change every month, because the change is not as radical as you might think. And then you go back to, okay, what are we prioritizing now practically from a roadmap perspective? It's really just continuing, I think, and this is where, what little context we have, if I was going to give advice on that, if your why, if your value, if you've articulated your mission or however culturally you would speak to it, it's really then from where you are, and you already have this momentum. You even already have you have a product to some extent. You've already been working with users. A lot of it is not being afraid to be more flexible in your road mapping. So even you could say, okay, we're agile, so we're going to set smaller targets and shorter cycles, but even just allow the momentum you've already created to open opportunity. And what I mean by that is to say, what is the path of least resistance? You've got a great product. You have people who are aligned. Where is the door open? Is it in hotels? Is it in B2B? Is it in somebody's network? Is it who is the first person who's willing to help you excite and delight people and reducing their barrier to entry to fitness? And that can be a strategy. And I'm only mentioning it to kind of shake loose maybe some of the structure that in which you approach the problem, which is how do we as a team have to sit and conjure out of the infinite amount of possibility to make our mission feel energizing? What do we have to put on paper? But really a lot of the focus that we work with people a lot is where am I right now and what's within my field of vision? Because you've got to go from where you are now to the next step. And that's the true, I think, spirit of being iterative or being agile, which is not let's sit down and plan to be agile in our heads, but really where am I today? Who's at my disposal? Who do I know? And let's take this really strong premise that I'm able to articulate after working it for several months or several years and see who else is excited about it and what doors are opened. Let the business in a way kind of start to cultivate itself. And I'm mentioning that kind of at a high level or abstract, but hopefully it'll shake some things loose because you don't have to have the burden of road mapping every time that you pivot, as long as you've got a strong foundation which your team is working against.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny you mentioned that. I was literally just talking to my co-founder about this last night. Because we do a monthly exercise where it's like, all right, like, what are we going to do this month? And it's flexible, but we have just a general idea. So we know we're marching towards something. And normally every month we do this planning, we just have this long list of like so many things that have to happen. But this was pre-pivot. And so now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, our list is pretty short because we actually just don't know if this is going to work. We're marching towards this test that we're building. And then we have to see. We might have to, like, we're trying not to over roadmap, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. But yeah, it's interesting. And just being able to kind of, like you said, shake off these predetermined notions and be really flexible and go with what feels right and look at the data to help verify if what feels right is going to take us the right way.